Welcome to Haunted Hospitality, Southern stories told by spooky gingers. I'm Robin.
And I'm Zoe.
And I have a story for you today, but first, Zoe, how's life?
Well, Robin, I would say like the number one aspect of my life right now is that you are physically in a room with me.
It's been a rare occurrence these last months.
Yes, it has been. And like I forget how it is to record in person.
I'm enjoying being about 2 feet away from you, staring into your eyes as we're speaking right now versus
Beautiful.
staring into your eyes through a computer monitor.
Yes, and I'm sure you're enjoying the coffee that I make for you from my very expensive coffee machine too.
I also appreciate that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. But for my actual life update,
Okay.
Kari and I had a moment of domestic bliss. This
Congratulations.
week. Okay. So you know who I like crafty things?
Mm-hmm.
Kari is very artistic, but he doesn't like real world crafts. He does like iPad, computer art, right? And I prefer more like get your hands in it art. And we fixed our couch this week, this closest one right here. So underneath it, it had holes torn in the fabric from both toes and Soup, deciding that they needed to rest in there.
Yes.
So we saw this one TikTok and I could not find her again. So I don't know who did it, but basically she just took her couch and she duct taped cardboard underneath it. And we were like, that's a good idea, but we're going to take it up a couple steps. So what we did is we got cardboard boxes. We cut it to the shape of underneath our couch. We bought this felt stuff, and it's black felt that matches our couch. And we wrapped and taped the felt onto the cardboard. And then we have a pool noodle that goes across the cardboard that we taped to the cardboard. That way it gives it a little bit more support so it's not sagging, right? And then we took it and we stapled it underneath the couch with a staple gun. And Kari went crazy for the staple gun. It gave him power he never knew he had. and we like fixed the bottom of our couch. It looks so good. And of course it's the bottom of the couch, so nobody's gonna see it. But both of us were just like, we did something.
You know, I'm going to stick my head under there later today and just confirm for the listeners.
I have plenty of pictures I can show you.
No, I don't believe that. I need to stick my head under the couch.
Go ahead.
Thank
We're
you.
gonna do it to the futon next. That's why we still have more cardboard over there.
Oh, fun stuff.
Yeah.
All right.
How about you, Robin? How's your life?
Oh, I'm doing good. So I watched Stranger Things Season 4, Part 1.
I see, okay.
Have you?
I haven't seen anything beyond Stranger Things Season 2.
Zoe, Season 3 is really good, actually.
I've
Season
heard
4 is
that,
really good.
but something happened between I don't know. I really liked Season 1, but then it became too popular. And
No, it
and
was
then,
Zoe.
And
Zoe.
then I was forced to watch Season 2 against my will.
Zoe.
Well, I watched Season 1 before it became like super duper duper popular. Like,
It was always super duper duper popular.
I
Yes,
watched it the
was.
day it came out. Like,
Okay, I'm sorry. A week after that, it was super duper duper popular.
Right, so-
That doesn't.
so-
you can't have that hipster
no,
mindset.
what I'm saying is like, I watched it willingly. I said, oh, that looks really interesting. So I watched it willingly. And then Season 2 came around and people were like, you have to watch it. And I said, no.
Why?
And then I ended up watching it. And everybody was like, oh, you have to watch Season 3. I'm like, nah, I'm
No,
good.
Okay. Can we like rewind a second because I missed something in your logic. Why, if you really liked Season 1, did you not want to watch Season 2?
Because people told me I had to watch it.
Zoe!
And then I watched Season 2 and I didn't really like it.
Okay, listen. Season 2, I'm trying to remember back to it. I think it had some growing pains. It got really good. Season 3 is awesome. They have a great new character named Robin.
And she's a lesbian, I know.
Yes, she's amazing. And then Season 4 is so good. Anyways, that's how my life is right now. I like watch Season 4. I have so many theories. I'm trying to figure out the freaking timeline because I feel like I was definitely a casual Stranger Things fan,
Okay.
but like always came back to it when it came out because I'm casual, but I love it. So by casual, I more mean like I was not the type to like obsess over it, like try to figure out what the heck was actually going on in the plot, and I was more like, this is just a really great show. And then I like got to the end of season 4 part 1 and I was like, oh my god. And those who have watched it know what I am talking about. So now I'm going back and I'm like, all right, give me the dates for when this happened and when this happened, because I gotta figure out what happened in between, when these things happened. There's a big overarching question, and I think I know the answer, and I'm excited.
Okay.
All right, I'm sorry.
The only thing I know about season 4 so far is that the creators forgot Will's birthday.
Okay, I don't remember that.
Okay.
I also don't really care.
Oh.
I mean, like, no, I love Will. I love Will. But I'm just like, you can forget Will's birthday. It's fine.
Well, apparently it, like, really fits his character because everybody forgets about him now or something like that. Yeah, so.
I mean, I don't.
I haven't seen beyond season 2, and he wasn't much in season 2.
I feel like if you are going to have a forgotten one, he's kind of it, but it also kind of makes sense for him to be a little bit forgotten just because, like, there's something, like, still okay, this isn't a Stranger Things podcast, everybody, but I'm just saying, like, if you're talking about group dynamics, it makes sense for him to still be at a remove, because I feel like he was gone for so long in season 1, and he is still... Elle has just such main character energy that, like, she still stays in the center of things, whereas he still is dealing with the psychological trauma of it all, but he doesn't have main character energy. So he's just kind of, like, still dealing with it and still, like, working to move on. And I'm like, you know what? He's actually such a really complex character, and I love that for him. So, like, I haven't forgotten about him, but I do get that, like, maybe he's not in the center of things. Okay, I feel like we could have a whole thing, but this isn't that. So do you have a something for us today?
I do have a something for us, and I think it's very, very nerdy. So
more nerdy than that conversation?
Yeah, a little bit, yeah.
Okay, everybody deal with us.
Okay, so you know how, like, states have official trees and official birds?
Yeah.
Apparently, they also have, like, a lot of official other things.
There's a flower.
There's some really random ones.
Okay. Please give me.
So I was like, well, will I go over all the trees? No, that sounds boring. You know, I would literally just be listing tree names, and who wants to hear that? You know? So I was just like, let me find the most amusing official subject and tell you that one for each state.
Okay, cool.
That we cover. Not 50 states.
That wouldn't be a something southern.
No, it wouldn't be.
It would just be a something.
So if you want, Robin, a couple of these we can gamify, where I can give you the topic and you have to guess what the official item is.
All right.
Okay. And all of this is from ereferencedesk.com. So.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm ready.
Alabama. They have an official cake.
Ooh, okay. I'm thinking Alabama. Why do you choose the state I, like, don't know all that much about? Okay, pineapple upside down.
Interesting. But no, it is called the Lane cake.
How was I supposed to get that? What is that?
No, I don't think you would have. There's a couple that I think you'll get. But it's a bourbon-laced cake, and it's, like, cake, and then the icing has nuts and fruits. So, like, pecans or maraschino cherries or raisins, something like that. So it's like the icing has the nuts, the fruit, and the bourbon, and then it's cake, icing, cake, icing, cake, icing.
Yeah, that sounds really good. Good job, Alabama.
Except no nuts. I don't like nuts.
You can keep the nuts, Alabama.
Okay, the next one is Florida. They have an official beverage, and this one...
Oh, the topic changes. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. So it's the most amusing.
Oh, okay. Most amusing pick. All right, they have an official beverage?
Yes. And I feel like you should be able to get this one.
Okay, I'm thinking Florida. It's hot there, so it's going to be a cold beverage.
Yes. Think of, like, the number one crop you think of.
Oh, it's orange juice.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so Georgia, they have a state tartan.
What's a tartan?
I had no idea. I Googled it. And apparently multiple states have this, but Georgia was the first one that I saw that had it. It's a plaid design.
Oh, so how am I supposed to verbalize what the state Georgia plaid
this one you
design
don't
is?
have to gamify.
Okay.
So this was established in 1997, and it is like, okay, so it's green with a little bit of a bluish and red. So Robin, I can show it to you.
This is very important, thank you. That's a nice tartan. It looks very Christmassy.
But yeah, so apparently having a official state plaid design is a thing.
That's good. I guess if you have to wear plaid, go with your state.
Yeah.
Actually, I probably wouldn't wear that plaid. It's too... I try to stay away from green and red together unless it's Christmas time.
True, yeah. So Arkansas, this one you won't get, has a state grape. Unless you want to guess the type of grape that is their official state grape.
Red? Seedless? I don't know my grapes very well.
It's a Cynthiana grape.
Oh, okay.
So apparently Arkansas is known for its winery grapes.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and that is what most of their wine is made out of, I think. Yeah. Kentucky. Mm-hmm. They have a state sport car. A state official sports car.
Okay, I'm gonna guess this one, I guess.
If you can get just, like, the type, like, the model of the car. Or the make, I guess.
I think it's the make. I did get confused about what was make and what was model. Okay, sport car, Kentucky, sport, Chevy.
Yes!
Can I guess the next one?
Yes.
Corvette?
Yes!
Yes!
Oh,
I'm sorry,
Soup.
Soup. I'm sorry, Soup. It's okay. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
Soup just went bolting. Yes, it's a Chevy Corvette because it was signed in 2010 because they're exclusively built in Kentucky.
All right, that's my peak. We can quit now.
Well, the next one I think you'll get, kind of, maybe. Louisiana. They have an official state donut.
Is it the beignet?
Yes,
yes!
it is. I personally was like, does it classify as a donut? Like, what defines a donut? But I just went with it.
It's fried dough. It is fried dough.
It is fried dough, yeah. Mississippi, they have a state toy, and that is the teddy bear.
Okay.
In North Carolina...
it's hard for me to gauge, like, what I'm gonna guess or what I'm not gonna guess.
This one you're not gonna guess.
Okay.
In North Carolina, they have a state frog, which I thought was amusing because a lot of places have, like, a state amphibian or reptile, like, official amphibian or reptile, but this one is specifically a state frog. And then they had a state amphibian. So the state frog is the Pine Barrens tree frog. And they put it as the official state frog because it was, it's on the endangered species list. So I think they were trying to, like, criminalize going for it, like, killing them, you know?
Yeah, or at least shame you.
Yes.
That is your state frog, sir. Why would you hunt a frog, honestly?
It's from, what is it called? Habitat demolition. So, like, they keep demolishing the natural habitat of this frog.
Okay, so it's not like hunting. You're like, okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So I think you can guess this one. South Carolina, it has a state snack food. This one's possible to guess. I don't know if you'll get it.
I'm trying to think, like, what do we eat here? Okay, so it's not gonna be hot.
It is hot.
It's hot?
Yes.
Okay, let me recalibrate what I'm thinking. And it's a snack food.
It's a snack food.
Can I pop it?
What do you mean pop?
Is it corn that can be popped?
It's not popped corn.
Did you just say popped corn?
Yes, I did.
You know it's called popcorn.
Yes, I do.
Shoot. Toast? I don't know. What is it?
It's boiled peanuts.
Oh, shoot.
Yeah, you could have gotten that one.
I should have. Okay, if you are on a rural road in South Carolina, you are passing a boiled peanut stand. Honestly, to be fair, that's like anywhere in the South.
Well, did you know that, like, some people genuinely don't know that you can boil peanuts?
You can boil anything, guys.
Well, yeah, but, like, I saw a TikTok recently about a gas station attendant who had, like, somebody come from the north and be like, what the heck are these? And, like, everybody in the comments were like, why would you boil peanuts? Like, what does it do? And it's like, well, you boiled them to make them soft. And everyone's like, it makes them soft?
What did they think would happen?
I don't know.
They're putting water in something.
I think they were thinking like roasting.
Oh, no.
Maybe. I don't know. But it's boiled. Like,
Yeah.
I don't think it's something they thought through.
Huh.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so this is very southern.
We have more?
Yeah, there's 3 more states.
Oh my god.
The next one is Tennessee.
All right.
They have a state rifle.
22.
Sure. I don't know.
I was just gonna guess.
A Barrett model M82/M107-20'6. I
Are you
have no idea what that
serious?
means.
Oh my god. I feel like here we are again in part 2 of
We
Zoe
don't
and
know
Robin
guns.
don't actually know a lot about guns.
Okay, so Texas, it was really hard to pick one, so I'm gonna list like 5 real quick. So they have official hashtags, they have official footwear, cowboy boots, they have official hats, cowboy hats, they have official domino game, 42, they have an official tie, a bolo tie,
Yep.
and they have official bread, which is pan de campo, aka camp bread, aka cowboy bread.
They're
But-
really leaning into their brand.
Yeah, yeah. But the one that I found the most amusing
Yes.
is their official vehicle that was signed into in 2005. You're not gonna guess it. It's a chuck wagon.
What's a chuck wagon?
It's the thing on the Oregon Trail.
That's their official vehicle?
That's their official vehicle. The white covered wagon.
Man, Texas.
Yeah.
You really know what you're about, I guess.
Yeah. And then the last one is Virginia, and they have an official boat, which is the Chesapeake Bay Dead Rise, which is a workboat used for oysters that were specifically built for the choppy waters of the Chesapeake Bay.
Good for them.
Yep. And that is my something southern.
I know more things now. Thank you, Zoe.
You're welcome. I told you it was nerdy.
It was.
So you have a story?
I do, yes. Before I get into it, this is a true crime one, and it comes with content warnings.
Okay.
So, content warning for violence, gore, and there is a suicide mention.
Okay.
Okay. So, on Friday the 13th,
Perfect.
in June 1980, we are in Wylie, Texas.
Okay.
By the way, everybody, because I mentioned last episode that I was watching a show called Candy on Hulu. It was based on a real true crime story. I decided to cover that.
Okay.
Because it happened in Texas. So this is that. So if it sounds familiar and you've seen it, that's because it
It's
is
that.
familiar. Yes. And actually, before I really do get into this, I want everybody to know, like, if you want to really dive into this story, there are 2 articles that are kind of like the seminal things referenced about this. They came out in the 1980s in Texas Monthly. It is by Jim Atkinson and John Bloom. They wrote articles called Love and Death in Silicon Prairie. There's a part 1 and a part 2, and they're from a book called Evidence of Love, A True Story of Passion and Death in the Suburbs, which is all about this case. So I'm just like letting you know, like, pretty much a lot of things reference back to these. So if you do Google this, like, you are going to find these quickly, and I'm just letting you all know, like, check these out if you are interested in the case.
Okay.
But, so we are at Friday, June 13th, 1980 in Wylie, Texas. This is about kind of a rural/suburban town where a lot of families live, who one of them works in the kind of booming electrical companies that are happening in Dallas.
Okay.
So one of those families was Alan and Betty Gore. Alan worked at a corporation down there, and Betty worked as a middle school teacher. They had married in 1970 and moved to the area in about the mid-70s.
Okay.
They had a daughter named Elisa, who was about 5 years old, and they had recently, just a year ago, had another daughter named Bethany. This morning, they were, in general, at this point in their marriage, they were doing pretty fine.
Okay.
They were doing a lot better than they had used to be doing. But this was kind of a difficult morning for them, or for Betty in particular, for 2 reasons. One of which is her husband, Alan, was having to go out of state on a work trip that weekend to Minnesota. And Betty, and we'll kind of get into this in a little bit, but she really, really, really didn't like when he would leave for work. She hated him traveling for work. And it wasn't that she felt unsafe. It was that she just felt really, really sad to be alone.
Got it.
Which is kind of interesting when you look back at her past, because growing up, she was very, very popular. Everybody really liked to be around her. I'm not saying that wasn't the case now. I'm just saying, like, he was, out of the two of them, much more the outgoing one, and she was much more the shy one, which was almost an inverse of how they were when they met in college and then got married.
Gotcha, okay.
So it seemed like he was maybe, and this is me reading into a little bit, and I'm trying not to be influenced by the show I watched, which I think portrays her character, at least from what I've been able to tell, differently than how I would have thought of her from how I'm seeing it. So I'm kind of assuming that the portrayal of her is not how I'm seeing it. But it seems like maybe he's a bit more at home or ingrained in the community than she necessarily feels. But then again, that's a little bit of projecting, and it could be from the show. That was one reason she was upset. She was upset that he had to go. He had recently-ish, about a year ago, switched jobs from one of the bigger corporations to a smaller one. And he didn't switch because he would be traveling less, but that was kind of an understood thing about the switch too. He was like going to be working more hours, but he was going to be in town.
Okay.
So this was something that maybe they hadn't had to deal with in a while, the two of them, and he knew how she felt about being alone. The other part of it that made it difficult for Betty was that she was scheduled to have her period 2 weeks ago, and she didn't have it. And I don't know exactly for sure how she felt about all that, but it seems like from everything that she was just kind of overwhelmed with everything. She had two, young girls, and she was also a middle school teacher, and she seemed to be definitely stressed about her job as well.
Okay.
So all of these things were kind of compiling, and they had, I don't necessarily know if it was an argument, but just like kind of were talking through these issues, and then ended on a good note.
Okay.
And so Alan drove away to go to the airport that day, and he said he saw Betty in the driveway holding up Bethany, who was the little 1-year-old, and she was holding up Bethany's hand to like wave goodbye to him, and that she was smiling. So they ended on a good note right there. He was a little bit concerned about her, not terribly, but mostly just kind of the normal amount of concern that he was when he went away for a while.
Okay.
And this wasn't a terribly long trip, but so he got on the plane, he got to his hotel at about 4 p.m., and he called to check in. The phone rang for a while, but nobody picked up. He wasn't sure what was up about that, but, he wanted to make sure everything was okay, so he ended up calling Betty one more time. The first time was before he got on this flight. Then he flew there, got there, called again to Betty, and she didn't answer again.
Okay.
So he was a little bit concerned, so he called a next-door neighbor named Richard Parker, asked him to just run over and check if Betty was home, knock on the door and everything. And Richard said sure, and so he went over and he knocked, but nobody answered. So he went back to tell him, that nobody was there, and Alan was a little bit more concerned, so he called a person named Candy Montgomery, who was a friend of Betty's. They all knew each other at a church, so this Wylie community, it seemed to be at least these group of people that we're talking about, that kind of the center of the community, the center of like social calendars and everything, was this church called the First United Methodist Church of Lucas.
Okay.
And so they really knew her through there. Candy had previously thrown Betty a surprise baby shower and everything for Bethany, and he went to see if Candy had seen her or known what was going on or anything, or if Betty had said she had plans. Candy had said that she had seen Betty that day, that in the morning she went over to Betty's house because the older daughter, Elisa, was staying over at Candy's that previous night because they had daughters who were friends.
Okay.
And so this was around the time that The Empire Strikes Back came out to the movie theaters, so Candy's kids wanted Elisa to stay the night one more time and go see The Empire Strikes Back with them. So all the kids were like at vacation Bible school during the summer. It was the summertime.
Okay.
And so she went over after dropping the kids off at vacation Bible school to just check in with Betty, she said, and to pick up the swimsuit because Elisa had a swim lesson that day, and so the idea was, well, she can just stay. I'll take her to the swim lesson, take her to the movies. She can stay the night, and then I'll bring her back the next day.
Right.
And she had said she had talked to Betty then, but that, she had left after that, and Betty didn't mention she had any plans.
And
so
just for clarification, Candy saw Betty after Alan had already left.
Yes.
Okay.
This would be, I think, mid-morning. Yes, this was mid-morning when she
Okay.
went over there. So she did offer to go over and check on Betty to see if everything was all right. But Richard said, no, I'm sure everything is fine.
Richard, sorry, I called him Alan.
No, you're right. His name is Alan. I don't know why I called him Richard. Oh my God. Lordy. Okay, everybody, forgive me. So then Alan went downstairs in the motel to have dinner with his coworkers. And he came up, and at this point, like, he's been calling, like, every little bit. It's not just like he's spending like 30 minutes over the phone calling everybody. It's kind of more spaced out than that. So I'm not saying like he spent 6 hours at dinner. But he came back at about 10 to his hotel room. He came back in his hotel room at 10. He called Betty, the house phone. There was no answer there. So then he called the neighbor Richard again, who had previously come over and knocked on the door. And he wanted Richard to come over and see if Betty's car was there.
Okay.
They were next door neighbors. Richard was actually the one who had sold him the house 3 years ago.
Got it. Okay.
And this will come up again just because he has keys to like houses he had given showings to, and so he kind of like had all of them, and so at one point he does try to like enter into the house with his keys, and so I just want you to have context for why he has keys.
Gotcha.
So Richard had kind of peered over, I don't even know exactly from where, but I have to think it was like somewhere near his own yard, just into the garage, and he only saw one car, which when Alan wasn't home, there were generally 2 cars in there.
Mm-hmm.
So he said he only saw one car and that the garage door was open. And he told Alan this, and then Alan got worried that Betty had an emergency, that she had to take the car and leave. And, she's taking care of the baby and stuff, so he was worried something might be up with the baby.
Mm-hmm.
So then he starts calling around again. He asks the hospital if, like, Betty has come in or anything. They say no. He asks the police if anything has happened. They say no. And he calls Betty one more time, and he just kind of checking in with all this information, and he tells her, the garage door was open, that Betty doesn't really leave the garage door open, and Candy offered to go check the hospital or check Betty's house, and he was like, no, you don't have to do that. He called Richard again.
Mm-hmm.
So Richard, he wanted him to go over and like try the doors, which Richard did. He didn't bring the keys over at this point, but he's like going and he's trying to open them. So he actually goes over to the garage, and at this point he's able to kind of see it from a different angle than he was from his yard, and he sees, oh, actually both cars are there. It's just that one of the cars was pulled way further up, so he couldn't see that. So actually Betty was home, at least from what he can tell, and then nobody's answering.
Yeah.
So he goes, because the garage door is open, there's a door within there to a room called the utility room, which is where they keep like an extra fridge, the washer dryer kind of thing. He tries to open that, but he can't. And he does note that there is a light on in there as well.
Okay.
And keep in mind, at this point, it's kind of late for I don't know, maybe Betty would be up, but like at this point, you're probably like 10:30, 11 at night.
And you should be like turning off the lights throughout the house.
And if the light's on, you might be there. And if you're there, why aren't you answering?
Right. Okay.
Richard comes over, tells him, hey, I still can't get in, but like her car is there. And at this point, Alan is really, really worried. So he tells him, like, just get in my house. Get in my house. Like,
do what you have to do.
Do what you have to do. Get in my house. He also calls other neighbors just because Richard had kind of seemed hesitant about, like, getting into the house. Maybe not from that phone call specifically, but he had, like, kind of, like, been maybe a little bit awkward feeling about it. So he called other neighbors, too. Well, he called one guy named Jerry. He called a guy named Jerry and asked him to come over. Jerry tried to open a door, couldn't open the door, and then Jerry came back to, like, kind of call another guy to come over because he had told his wife what was going on, and the wife got, like, really nervous thinking that, like, somebody's in the house. So, like, hey, still go over, but take another guy with you. So Jerry called another guy named Lester to come over, and then they all kind of...
Sorry, these are such suburban white names.
They are. So Jerry, Lester and Richard. These are all very... And then you have Alan.
Yeah.
These are all... Astute observation there. So,
Thank you.
So they all kind of converge on the house at the same time. And then you basically just see them all kind of walking around trying to figure out how to enter. They're at this point trying to pull up windows at the front. And then Richard starts in with his mound of keys. He's trying to figure out which one goes to this house, if he has someone that goes to this house. He sticks it in the lock. And then he doesn't even have to unlock anything. The door is unlocked. The front door was unlocked. Nobody thought that the front door would be unlocked, so that was not something anybody tried.
So wait, but they were trying other doors. Why didn't they try the front door?
I think their thought was probably like, the front door would be locked if it's at this point at night.
And I guess the other guys, when they came onto the scene, they probably figured, well, he's probably already tried the front door.
Exactly. There's too many cooks in the kitchen. There's too many white suburban names in the
in the front yard.
In the front yard.
But if you were a woman by yourself in this house with your 1-year-old, and you just see 3 men walking around trying at doors and windows, I would be terrified.
I'd be terrified too. One time I was living in a subdivided house in like a little studio section, and it was like maybe 9:30. Okay, I was going to sleep early, but I was going to sleep and I just heard my doorknob turning. Yeah. And I was so freaked out, and it turned out it just was somebody who lived downstairs who thought she was going to somebody else's apartment up there, and I opened it and she was like, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry." And I'm like, "Good night." I was just that was like a really stressful moment for me. Yes. Okay. So these 3 are going in the house and they start to kind of do a sweep. They're not noticing anything in particular except when they get to the bathroom. There's a dark substance that would later be known to be blood in there, and then they heard the baby crying.
Okay.
So the baby was ultimately okay. I'm just gonna like put that out there.
Okay.
But the baby Bethany had been in her crib untended to for, at that point, probably about 12 hours. So she was very hungry. She had been like crying like all that time, so her voice was really hoarse, and she had been like sitting in her waist and stuff, and it was just a really, really bad situation for her. So Richard actually took her back to his house, and that's where he called the police, because at that point they knew something bad had happened and they were getting her out of there, which very good.
100% agree
with.
Oh
yeah. So at that point it's just Jerry and Lester there, and they're walking through the house, kind of going back to the other side of it, if I'm getting my geography right. And then they kind of notice that there's a bad smell. And they get closer and closer, and the utility room door is shut. And I think by that point, that's one of the last things they've checked. So one of them opens it really quickly and then shuts it immediately. And like kind of screams like, basically, don't go in there.
Okay.
It's really, really bad. And guys, this is kind of, there's going to be gore later, but this is kind of really where it's going to be for a hot second, because he didn't actually even see the body in that moment. It was just a lot of blood everywhere. And so like he knew like she's dead. Like,
yeah.
We have to call the police. And then I think Lester also works there. No, it was Lester who opened it first, and then Jerry came in, opened it too. And at that point, I think he might have seen her a little bit, but he also shut it very quickly. And their initial thought was that it was a gunshot.
Okay.
Because of the amount of blood, and again, they were only looking at it very quickly. So
right.
They were about to call either Alan or the police. Well, Richard had already called the police, but actually the phone started ringing in the house, and it was Alan.
Oh.
And so they told Alan they told Alan that Betty was not.
Okay.
And Alan, his first thought, because they had said like, she was shot, and I think they thought that like she shot herself. And his go-to thought when they said that she was shot, he said, "But we don't have a gun." So like he was thinking, because she had been so upset this morning, he had kind of thought like this was a suicide. And I think that's probably what he was really, really concerned about when he was starting to realize that like it seems like she's there, but nobody knows what's going on. I'm just gonna go ahead and like let y'all know this was not a suicide, actually.
Okay.
He thinks it's a suicide. He ends up
booking
calling
the next plane.
Well, I'm sure he comes back very soon. He ends up calling Candy and telling her what happened, and Candy is crying, on the phone, and he does, mention that like, he it's not even like him saying like I think she killed herself. It's like she did, like this is his understanding of the situation. And he asked her not to tell Elisa, their daughter,
right.
because he just wants to be the one to tell her.
Right.
So Candy gets off the phone. Did you have a question?
Yeah, no, not a question, just a comment. I forgot that like Candy had his daughter.
Yeah.
And so I was like, why is he, I mean, I know he asked her for help earlier, but like why is he calling her? But no, no, that makes sense. You would want to tell the person who's taking care of your child. That's
true. That's very true. So, she gets off the phone call, and so she's married to this guy named Pat. Mm-hmm. And Pat asked her if Betty is dead, and Candy said she didn't know because he actually never said that she was dead, but that she had to assume he was because the way he, like, phrased it, it was that, like, well, they found her, you know?
Okay.
And he also had told her, he called again later just because he had flight information. Again, she's watching the kid and stuff. And he let her know that, like, by the way, the police are probably going to want to talk to you because I had mentioned, just kind of talking about Betty's day, that you had been there earlier that day. So the next morning, as you can kind of imagine what happened in a small town, the news gets out very, very fast because everybody kind of wakes up, they turn on their radio. And a lot of people call Candy. So Candy, she kind of grew up as an army brat, and she's, because of that, or like probably as a result of that, she is just very outgoing, and they had only moved there about a year beforehand. Well, actually, no, at this point, they moved there in 1977, and this was 1980. So, okay, they had lived there for 3 years. But basically, I was kind of trying to, like, point out that Candy had kind of turned herself into, like, a very big, just personality, kind of almost central point, not a focal point necessarily, but like a central point of like the social community there and stuff. So she was like getting all these calls from people letting her know like about Betty. So she would tell them what she knew, that like it had been a gunshot. And then all of a sudden, because more information is coming out, somebody calls and they say, oh no, it was an axe. And it was an axe, actually. They found out like Betty, and sorry guys for the gore, had been hit 41 times with an axe. More than half of which was to the face and head, which indicates rage, indicates personal, and among this other information that's kind of coming out and coming through the phone system is that they found a footprint at the scene that was covered in blood in the utility room that did not belong to Betty. And so, you know, Candy is on these phone calls. She's holding the phone up, and in her other hand, she is chopping up a pair of sandals and putting it in the trash.
You know, I was like, I had it in the back of my head just because the thing was called Candy, and also, like, she seemed a little bit too central to the plot for somebody who was
like, why does he keep calling her?
Just taking care of the kids.
Yeah. She found her way in there. For some reason, I didn't even think that was the name of the Hulu series would like
trigger that.
Yeah. All right, but now we're going to do a little bit of a rewind. So again, that was June. Thank you for that. So again, that was like kind of June 13th, 14th, 1980.
Okay.
We are going to go kind of back to, mostly this next part of the story starts in the summer of 1978.
Okay.
So Candy and her husband, Pat, had by this point been living in the community for about a year. He was working at Texas Instruments, which you might know from the calculator company. And like I said, she inserted herself, my read is that she inserted herself into communities very easily because she had a very outgoing, bubbly personality. They, you know, really hooked up into the church, and so that was a lot of the social calendar. And women did a lot of stuff with the church. Like, they were in charge of the Vacation Bible School. She was a lead member in the choir. She was, I think, a Sunday school teacher, and she was in volleyball, and, well, the church volleyball. And so her husband was not exactly that way. He was kind of more shy, more reserved.
An engineer.
An electrical engineer, yes. Yes. And she was kind of growing bored with her life.
Okay.
And specifically, she wanted something to, I think, just make things more intriguing. Mm-hmm. She wanted to have an affair. And
so cool. Like, not even like, oh, I met someone and fell in love, or
no,
and accidentally, I think I'm going to have an affair today.
No, like, yes, that seems to be pretty much it. She wanted an affair that would be strictly sexual. Okay. She recognized that feelings would probably be a detriment in this situation, or could be a complicating factor in this situation. And she was open about the fact that she wanted to have an affair with her friends. So she would be talking about it and stuff. And
that's very Christian of her.
I'm not trying to be, judgy.
No.
But I mean, it really was, to her, it seems very cut and dry.
Okay.
So she was playing volleyball. Alan was on the volleyball team. This is summer 1978. They bump into each other. And then
they bumped into each other.
Oh my God, Zoe. They bumped into each other, and she realized she was attracted to him. Uh-huh. And so she thought about it for a little bit, and then after another volleyball practice, choir practice, I don't know, everybody was kind of involved in everything else. She got up to him in the parking lot and she was like, hey, I want to talk to you about something. And he's like, okay, what is it? And so she gets in the car and then she tells him, I'm attracted to you. And then she leaves.
Okay.
Just like letting you know. So then he's like, okay.
Okay.
And, you know, there had been some issues kind of with his marriage, like I had said. By like June 1980, he and his wife were a lot better than they had been before. But, you know, it took a lot of work to get there. And they were both kind of, they do this thing later called marriage encounter, which I'm going to wait to get into. But basically, I looked at like quotes from like the letters they had sent to each other. Marriage encounter is its own thing. I will get to it in a hot second. But like, it was all about like wanting to communicate with each other better.
And this is Ellen and Beth, right? Betty. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, there's a Betty and then there's a Bethany. It's Betty.
That's the baby, right?
The baby is Bethany.
Okay,
yes.
Betty.
So, but like right now it was just like not very good for him. I think that like they just didn't feel very close to each other. And I'm sure you can get like more complicated. Check out the Texas Monthly article for more. But basically, he was attracted to the proposition. Or it wasn't, I guess, a proposition yet. He was attracted to the fact that it might be a proposition, but he was also incredibly, incredibly unsure about it. Because previously, Betty had cheated on him years and years ago, and they had moved on from it. But he remembers how much it had hurt him when that had happened, and he really, really didn't want to hurt her.
Okay.
But he also wasn't happy, and he thought maybe this would happening in this relationship, he thought maybe this would help. The article really gets into like the psychology of the cheating and stuff, or at least their inner thoughts, their specific inner thoughts over it, not the concept of cheating itself. But basically, a week later, he comes up to Candy and he tells her like, okay, what did you kind of want to talk about the fact that you said you're attracted to me? And she said, well, I kind of want to have an affair. And he was just saying like what I had said earlier, that he really didn't know if he could do that to Betty. And then he kissed her, and then they left the car. And basically, over the next few months, there was a constant back and forth over whether or not they should have an affair. It involved, at some point, like daily calls about it. It involved a big sheet of paper that had a pro-con list.
Dear listeners, you cannot hear my confused and incredulous face, but it is there.
Because remember, that was like summer or late summer. They ended up starting the affair in December. The in-between was a lot of strategizing and trying to figure out if they were going to do this or not do this.
This is like the coldest take to cheating ever.
I know. Like, you can... like... Toward the end of it, Candy was like, okay, listen, I might just have to choose a different guy because this is like a weird amount. And like, basically, they came up with like a whole bunch of rules. They came up with 8 rules specifically. It was very scheduled out. It was every other week, Tuesdays or Thursdays. She would bring lunch. They would split the cost of everything. And then the big rule, I think, and this was the thing that on the pros and cons list he was most concerned by, was that like feelings cannot get involved. If anybody starts having feelings for anybody else, we quit it, because they kept repeating to each other, we don't want to hurt your marriage, we don't want to hurt my marriage, we don't
don't do it.
Yes, that is the
sorry.
logical is the logical thing, but I'm just relaying the information.
Okay.
So they started having the affair in December.
Okay.
By the way, at this point, and I don't know the timeline of everything, but at this point, Betty is pregnant with Bethany.
Okay.
They continue the affair for a while, during which time there are some, like, ebbs and flows of it. And just so we know, like, the feelings do happen, and they actually happen kind of fairly quickly. So in February, I think it's February, Candy brings up to him, like, hi, I'm having feelings for you. Should we stop this? And he's like, no, I don't think we should stop this. And his thing was, it really was a very almost oddly companionable situation, because they would almost talk more than they had sex. Like, they would talk all the time. She would like leave gifts on his car, which eventually got kind of tiring for her, because she's like, okay, this was fun at first, but now it's been months. Now I'm having to come up with gifts all the time. And she was kind of tired of like making elaborate lunches and stuff for when they did meet up. But, like, they were both listening to each other and talking with each other, which, like, they at least felt wasn't really happening outside of this.
Okay.
But he didn't really think that he was going to fall in love with her when she said that. And so he was like, well, I think we can just continue. So they did later, and I'm again, it's kind of, when you're kind of like talking about like months and when specific things happen, I'm kind of like losing the thread of it, so I'm just kind of giving you the broad strokes. At some point, Candy throws Betty the surprise baby shower. This is during a time, I think, when they're having a small break in their affair. It was like a scheduled break. He was like, okay, she's getting really pregnant. What if she goes into labor? I'm going to need to be like reachable at all times, and I'm going to have to like not be breaking away from her to go see you in the early days of having the child. And so they're like, okay, so they took a scheduled break.
Wow.
Yeah. Betty had the baby. It kind of brought Betty and Alan closer, but he, restarted the affair with Candy. But after that point, after the baby was born, he started feeling guilty in a way he hadn't felt guilty before. So previously, before he actually started the affair with Candy, he had asked her to do marriage encounter. And marriage encounter was this thing that a lot of people at the church were doing, where you kind of go to a weekend retreat and you have group times together where you're always supposed to include your spouse, and you're always supposed to like be like right beside them, talking with people. And when you're in conversations in groups, like you are always including that person.
Okay.
And then you kind of go back to your room and you have basically assigned things to write about in a journal, and then you share that journal with the other person, and this is the private part, and then you all talk about your feelings about that. Betty said no originally, that she didn't think that they needed to do that. And so he's like, okay. And then after the baby comes, they do go, and it's actually a really good experience for them. They apparently have a lot of breakthroughs. They feel a lot closer on the way back, and Alan does see Candy for a bit more after that, but it seems to be he is feeling more and more guilty, because he's kind of to a point where he's like, I'm being there for my family less because I'm being there for Candy.
Gotcha.
And eventually he has kind of like brought up to her a couple times quitting by this point, and then she was always like, no, let's not quit, or she like left it there, or nobody quit anything. And then she like went up to him the day after he tried to do one of these things, and she said, okay, I see now that you are actually saying that you kind of want to quit, but you're leaving the actual doing of the breaking up to me. So I'm not going to reach out to you anymore. And it's not like, I'm not reaching out to you. You screw this. It was like, so I see basically you want me to end this, so I'm not going to be the one to reach out anymore.
Okay.
So things are done. And that is around, I think it's October-ish. October to the end of 1979. They've been seeing each other for about 11 months at this point.
Okay.
Now we're kind of back to the point, and it's, they didn't, it seems that they didn't rekindle anything, just because, like, they laid it out pretty clear. I'm assuming, like, when they saw each other versus when they didn't. So it seems like they really did take that break between, let's say, maybe December 1979 and then June, when these things started to, when the murder happened.
Yeah.
Or the killing, because there's a very clear distinction with those words, especially as it applies to this case.
Okay.
So, okay. Basically, we're back to, in the story time, thank you, everybody, we're back to June 1980, after Betty has been killed, and when more information is coming about, and when investigators are trying to get down to the bottom of what's happening. Now, they are seeing that signs are pointing more and more to Candy, because I guess they measure her feet. I don't know, but they're able to kind of be like, we think that's her footprint or her shoe print.
Maybe they found the chopped up sandal in the trash or something.
How did they end up knowing about that? Maybe she said that. They found a fingerprint, a bloody fingerprint on the fridge that they matched with her. So they found that out, and then they were having some cognitive dissonance about it, I think. Or maybe not cognitive dissonance. I think that's too much of a word. They weren't able to, for this situation, they weren't able to figure out why she would have done this at first.
Right.
And they were, because you kind of have like this weird thing where it's like a very tiny, like, okay, not very tiny, but like it's a small footprint. Candy's 5'2". She's small. The axe was heavy. It was 3 feet long. It was hit 41 times. They were thinking like, the footprint says not a man, but I think they were thinking that like it had to be somebody bigger, stronger, something like that to do the axe. But I don't think that was kind of clouding their thoughts too much on this, but it just that Candy really didn't seem to them the type, and again, the lack of motive. Eventually, on June 17th, though, Alan told them about the affair.
Okay.
At that point, I think they were really, really thinking Candy, just because, well, an affair is a very charged thing.
Yeah. And it would put the rage into making a 5'2" woman seem like a 6'10" man.
It would put the rage in there. She was the last person that they know of to see Betty alive.
That's right.
And there were a few more things, and the fingerprint. And there was another thing too, but I do think it was the fingerprint and stuff that sealed the deal. But a little girl who was friends with Elisa had gone over that morning to see if, like, Elisa could play or something, and she had knocked on the door, but nobody answered, so she went back. But she did later see, like, Candy leaving the house. Okay. So the idea is that perhaps, like, maybe she knocked on the door when Candy would have been there, but nobody came to it.
Okay.
And so all of that kind of culminated in Candy being charged with murder on June 27th. She turned herself in. At this point, she was saying she didn't do it.
Okay.
She got out on a $100,000 bill.
That's a lot for the 70s.
I think, yeah, it is. It wasn't, like, personally paid. It was, like, a bail loan system, I think. Bail bond, something like that. I don't actually know what it is.
The thing where you pay 10% or something like that?
I don't know, maybe.
I don't know, yeah.
I mean, she and her husband were very well off, but I don't know if they were, like, sparing $100,000 in 1980, weren't well off.
Right.
Now, one thing to note, at least at this point, and I'm so confused over the timeline of public perception in this case, but at least at this point, their community, their church, was, like, behind Candy 100%. They were like, she did not do this. She could not have done this.
She's an innocent child of the Lord, and she's unable to do.
I'm not trying to cheesify the church reaction to this, but, like, they really liked her.
Did you say Jesus-fy or cheesify?
Cheesify.
Okay, cheesify.
I'm saying, like, she was, like, a big part of their community. They really liked her, and they were like, no, 100%, you did not do this. There were a lot of people reaching out to her who she had, like, kind of met before, who were, like, sending her cards and stuff saying, like, we totally are with you 100%. They were, after she was arrested, for a few days, got out, she and her husband were going to church, and everybody was hugging them and was, like, totally on their side. I don't know if that was, I don't know what changed public perception between then, which was, like, June or early July 1980, and then a few months later in October.
Okay.
But by that point, at least the broad public perception once the case got out was very anti-Candy. And perhaps that could have been outside of their community. I'm not quite sure about that.
Okay. Did Alan ever go public with the details of their affair? Or did that wait until the court did?
See, that's part of the thing that I just don't know.
Okay.
Because it is a little fuzzy. What I was able to find out about everything, the clips I was able to see in actual newspapers at the time were all, like, either during the trial or, like, right after the trial. And so there wasn't a lot of, like, reflection over when everybody in the public got certain information.
Right, okay.
But the trial started in October 1980, which I thought was actually, like, a pretty quick turnaround for a trial. I mean, the crime committed in June, trial happening in October. Doesn't it usually take longer than that?
I was thinking that's a little bit long. It depends on, like, where you are. Okay. Like, a smaller town, I feel like it's pretty quick turnaround because there's not that many people
well, I'm pretty sure
crimes.
It was the state of Texas against her.
Oh.
I think it was that.
If it's the entire state, then yeah, I would say that's pretty quick.
Yeah. I'm not actually sure. Sorry, everybody. Robin and so we need to research the law.
Yeah, let's just take a law class. Let's take an ammo class, and then we'll get flagged by the FBI for...
Oh, my God. All right, 1980. October 1980. So she called, like, obviously this was a standing room only situation. People were lining outside of the courthouse. This was big news by this point. She pled not guilty by way of self-defense. So, she was saying that, yes, she was the one to kill Betty, but that it wasn't murder. And that basically it was a kill or be killed situation.
41 strikes, though? That
was a major part of the prosecution's argument, that it was like...
And you had not a scratch on you.
No, she did have scratches.
Okay.
Sorry, we're going to get... I'm going to get into what Candy says happened.
Okay.
I'm definitely going to get there, and that is going to involve, just explanations for certain injuries and stuff. But the prosecution's argument was like, well, you didn't have to, like, do that much. And their argument was also, why didn't at any point you run away when you did have control over the axe?
Right.
And then the defense argument, well, okay, I'll get into the defense argument. Basically, what the jury was tasked to understand was, did she knowingly, I'm going to actually find this exact quote, because did she knowingly and intentionally kill Betty?
Okay.
Because if she did, they're saying that's not self-defense. Mm-hmm. So, okay, it started out, I think, like, when she was, like, when she was on the witness stand. It didn't start out looking terribly good for Candy at first, just because Candy was, like, acting really removed. Her lawyer really wanted her to be, like, very passionate and emotional on the stand, gain a lot of sympathy, but he was asking her these questions, and she was giving him these very, like, short, monotone answers, until she got into her discussion of what happened that day.
Okay.
So everything I'm about to say is what Candy said happened.
Okay.
Here's the thing about this case, and I'm just gonna, like, preface it. Like, we only get one story because only, like, one person lived to tell about it. I'm going to, like, just preface this whole thing by saying, like, I don't know what happened. Nobody knows what happened. Mm-hmm. You can, like, try to understand it, but you're really only going off of, like, and anything is possible, basically. Mm-hmm. So, okay, I'm going over what Candy said happened. She said that, she was having Lisa over that day. She was going over to Betty's while the kids were at vacation Bible school to, 1, get a Lisa swimsuit, and 2, just to check that Lisa could stay another night. So she said that about mid-morning, she went over there. Betty looked a little bit annoyed when she opened the door, and which could be because she had probably just put down Bethany for a nap, and maybe she didn't want the sound of the door to wake her up and stuff. At the door, Candy asked if Elisa could stay another night. She explained about The Empire Strikes Back, and Betty said, yeah, that's fine, and then invited her in for a little bit coffee so she can give her swimsuit to her. Candy came in, and then they were just kind of chatting for a little bit, and Betty at first seemed a little bit uncomfortable, but she eventually kind of got more comfortable, it seemed, and at some point, Betty did say, like, oh, hey, get peppermints for Elisa, because Elisa didn't like to put her head under the water, so they kind of would bribe her with peppermints during her swim lesson if she put her head under the water.
Okay.
So Candy was like, okay, cool. And then she looked at her watch and was like, okay, I kind of have to get going. Let's get, Elisa's bathing suit. And then Beth kind of looked at her, and then she said, are you sleeping with Alan? Are you having an affair with Alan? And Candy said no. And then Betty said, okay, well, have you? And Candy said, yeah, but that it was a long time ago.
Okay.
Yes.
A couple months. Or a few months.
And she said that Betty got, like, her eyes kind of got distant. And then she told her to wait a second, got up, went to the utility room, and came back holding the axe. Mm-hmm. And she was kind of holding it awkwardly. And she said, like, kind of, and this wasn't, from Candy's retelling of this, admittedly a very intimidating threat. She was kind of just saying, like, don't see Alan again.
Okay.
Holding the axe. It's kind of implied. And then Candy said, like, okay, listen, I know I have your daughter. I'm just going to go ahead and take her back here after vacation from Bible school. Like, I think under the circumstance, maybe she didn't stay home she should not stay with me over night if, we're like this. Because Betty had said, I think, like, I don't want to see you again or something.
Yeah.
And then Betty told her, no, keep Elisa one more night, because she said, I don't want to see you again. So I think maybe in her mind, I don't know if she was thinking that Pat, who was Candy's husband, could take Elisa over. I don't know if it was just basically her thinking, like, I don't want to see you right now. I know I need to get my daughter eventually, but I really don't want to see you anymore here. Mm-hmm. And, Candy, I think, said sure. And then Betty put down the axe, left it leaning against the door to the utility room or right by it, so it's in the living room right now. And she crosses, I think, the room. And again, if I'm hoping I'm getting the geography of the house right. She crosses the living room in the opposite direction, and she says, okay, you get this swimsuit off the dryer. I'll get the towels from the bathroom for Elisa. And I'm just going to put in my little 2 cents here just to, like, raise a little flag. Not saying that this is false, but so I was listening to this great podcast called Vanity Fair Still Watching, which is like, and this relates, I swear to you, Vanity Fair Still Watching, where they, like, talk about TV show that came out. And so they did an episode on Candy. And in that episode, they interviewed Jessica Biel and I think somebody named Robin, who was like a showrunner, director, creator or something of this show. And they were talking about basically the fight choreography, the fight scene that they have. And the very specific choice they had behind the choreography of it, which is that originally the fight choreographer had come in adding some things. They had started out with Candy's story, just what Candy said, and he had added some things to make certain things make sense visually. Okay. And the director was like, no, we're actually not going to add anything to it because we only want to portray it, like, because they made a conscious choice to portray things only as Candy said it, but with the caveat that this was only as Candy said it.
Got it. Okay.
And so she said, if that means that certain things don't make sense in the fight, then we're going to show them not making sense.
Right. That's a really good move.
I thought so too. And the thing is, I was watching the full disclosure when I was like watching the Candy fight scene. I didn't quite think anything didn't make sense necessarily. Like, I guess like, but I wasn't watching it thinking like, oh, I'm gonna keep my mind out for something like that.
Right.
But I was reading this wondering.
Yeah.
And so I think we're a little bit before the fight choreography scene, but there's going to be one other place where I insert saying, like, if there's a place that doesn't make sense here to me, it's this. Mm-hmm. So, but the first one that doesn't make sense is, it seems like a really weird choice to have just somewhat awkwardly, not really threateningly, but still threatened somebody with an axe saying, like, hey, don't see my husband again. Put the axe down. Cross the room in the opposite direction, say you're going to get a towel, and then tell the other person who you were just threatening to walk closer to the axe to go to the utility room where the washer is to get the bathing suit. When you could just take the axe back into the utility room, get the bathing suit, get the towel. That seemed like a weird choice to me.
Yeah.
And like the further she walked away, like I think I'm like also, maybe I thought about this during the show too, but I was just thinking like that is a really vulnerable position you're putting yourself in, like walking away from the axe knowing that person is getting closer to it. I don't know, it gave me like the heebie-jeebies. Yeah. So that is my first of two little flags I'm putting up.
So are you saying that you believe that Candy's story is not accurate, or are you saying this thinking that maybe Betty wasn't fully in her right mind?
Okay, that's a good distinction. Okay, here's what I'm actually saying. I am not going to come out of this story saying I think one way or another about what is true, what isn't true. I am only I'm relaying information, but I am pointing out, just as a person who is discussing it, what doesn't make sense to me. And if I was thinking it doesn't make sense as in maybe that's something pointing to Candy was lying without like saying Candy was lying. I'm just, laying out things that do and don't make sense about the case. But it could have been a thing like just saying maybe Betty was probably frazzled in that moment. I don't know if frazzled is the right word, but she had just, according to the story, she had just done probably a very out of character thing.
Right.
And maybe she was just feeling embarrassed. Maybe she needed to get out of the room. I don't know. But that's like reading so much into this person that I have no idea about. Right. But it just did seem like an odd move. And I was thinking of it from the terms of, did it happen like this?
Got it. Okay.
Okay. And also at any point, if you have things where that like you have like clarifying questions or like well, I'm not sure about this, just like, feel free to bring it up.
Okay.
So they got their respective things. Betty got a towel from the bathroom, came back. Candy got the swimsuit from the washer, came back, and they're standing right by the axe. And they kind of pause there, and Betty kind of like reaches over into the peppermint candy bowl, gives her peppermints, and so Candy is putting everything into her bag. She's putting the towel, bathing suit, candies into her bag. Must have been a big bag. And then she kind of looks up and sees Betty, and Betty looks really sad. Mm-hmm. And then she kind of reaches out and she says, I'm sorry. And then she says that like the kind of sad look flipped to mad like really quickly. Mm-hmm. And then this is when the fight starts. So gore warning. Okay. Gore warning. And also this is kind of like, this is not a quick thing and there's like lots of moving parts. So I might not get everything. It might be kind of hard for me to do the retelling of it.
Right.
But basically, Betty pushes her back into the room, grabs the axe, and I think starts to bring it down on Candy, but it only like, I think the flat of it hits her head a little bit, which I think accounts for a cut that she did have on the top of her forehead on the right side.
Okay.
You know, so Candy gets hit a little bit. I think Betty raises it again. Candy moves to the side. Betty brings it down, and it gets Candy's toe. The toe is not cut off. It's just a cut on the. It's a deep cut on the toe, but it's a cut on the toe. And then she brings it back up, and I think at this point, this is when Candy grabs a hold of the axe, and then it is them kind of jockeying for who has control over it. They're going back and forth, and Betty bites Candy's hand where it's holding the axe, and then Candy uses that moment because I think Betty is bent kind of awkwardly to do it, and she's off kilter. Candy pushes her back with that, and then Betty falls to the floor, and then this is the second flag I'm going to put up, and this is the second and last, I think, flag that I'm going to put up, because Betty is knocked back, and at this point, Candy brings the axe down, and it is to the back of her head. And I was trying to picture, how do you fall, and then you're trying to get up, and then it's to the back of your head.
Yeah.
And
especially if you're fighting someone, you don't, like, instinctually, you don't want to turn your back to them.
You don't, no, not in that situation. And so I was trying to figure that out, and so the closest I got to it, trying to see, like, how she could have fallen so that she was, like, falling forward or onto her front, was that perhaps, like, because she was, like, maybe, like, tilted in an odd direction and she fell. It did say she lost balance, so maybe she kind of like spun and fell. But that was I read that, and I that was a little bit of a flag for me, because I also think if you were kind of explaining what had happened and you were presented with like these certain amounts of blows and most of them came to the front, it feels like you would have to really explain one that came from the back.
Yeah.
And so I'm not saying that this didn't happen. I'm just saying that was a moment that was like, huh, to me.
Okay.
Yeah. So after that, Candy was like pretty sure that she had not like as in killed her as in Betty was dead, because she wasn't, but that was like a fatal blow.
Okay.
There was a lot of blood, but Betty got up, and Candy said that at that point she tried to go for the door to leave, but like Betty kind of like came up behind her, like kind of like really hard, picked up the axe, and they started wrestling for it again. Yeah, I'm trying to also picture how that happens, but maybe like got the axe from in front of her, I'm not sure. But they were wrestling for it, they were circling each other, and Candy, during this point, reached the garage door, tried to open it, but Betty shut it and she locked it.
I'm sorry, you're struggling with someone with an axe, you have a blow to the back of your head, and you're gonna
lock the door.
Think long enough to lock the door.
That's why I said I think this is the last thing I'm bringing up, because I was just thinking about the locked door. I don't know. It was, that's another weird moment, if there's another weird moment. So, you know, Betty locked the door. Betty pulled on Candy's hair, and then Candy fell, and then Betty tried to raise the axe, but she, at that point, like, she was really weak because she was losing a lot of blood, and then Candy pushed at her leg, and then they were sitting and fighting for the axe, and they tried to, I think Candy was like trying to escape one more time, and then Betty came up to her, and then I think was like about to hit her. They were fighting for the axe or something, and then this is where it kind of like gets like really weird. Betty said shh, like she shushed her. And
is the baby sleeping?
I guess that could be it, but I think like Candy was maybe like screaming or was about to. I can't actually remember, but see, okay, they really delve into this moment, because she went, I'm going to kind of take you out of the fight for a moment. She went to a psychiatrist who did hypnosis on her. This was, you know, in tandem with her defense. And the idea was, well, one, this was kind of how they got her to really tell them what actually happened. So, like, some of this was like, and I mean, I don't know. Let me see. I mean, she did 3 hypnosis sessions, and they were really kind of like trying to use this to go into what happened to her and also trying to unlock why she would have done this based off her past memories. Basically, they were relating this moment of her being shushed to a moment when she was 4 years old, when she had a cut on her head, And she was in a doctor's office or an emergency room, and she was being examined by the doctor, and she was crying and stuff. And her mom said, shh, basically, like, what will the people in the waiting room think, like, if they can hear you and stuff? And she said, like, they were basically making the argument that she had, like, held on to that rage for so long, and then it came out in this moment where she had a cut in her head and she was being shushed. Yeah.
From 4 years old to, I'm assuming, 30-ish.
30. Yes.
Okay.
So now listen, I thought that this kind of like is what kind of, I thought this idea of repressed memories kind of came up more in the 90s, in terms of psychology, especially related to crime. I'm not exactly sure. Maybe this was something that her psychiatrist, like, he apparently in these hypnosis sessions unlocked that from her, and then he was, like, pretty adamant that this was that. So, like, I'm wondering, like, okay, is this just something that, like, was a very normal practice of bringing up in these sessions at the time, and so it was maybe more believed it could be something, I don't know. I hear that, and I'm like, I honestly don't know about that.
Yeah.
But
at least not enough rage for me, you know, whack a friend 41 times.
yeah. I'm also saying that, like, she wasn't the one who came up with that as a reason behind it.
Right, yeah.
So I think that's really what I was kind of trying to get about, like, if, like, it can still seem unlikely and be unlikely, but that doesn't necessarily mean that she's lying, because that was also something that was, like, came out in hypnosis sessions, and who's she to dispute the psychiatrist?
Right, unless she, like, purposely mentioned it.
And I don't know about that. Yeah. Man, hypnosis is so weird. Because, like,
especially since it doesn't necessarily work on everyone.
Weird aside, so, like, were you there during when we went to that hypnosis session, like comedy hypnosis?
No.
At the beginning of college?
I was in a class that started at 7 p.m.
It was the day before classes started. Okay, whatever.
Okay, then
anyway,
never mind.
So I went to it.
Okay.
But one of my biggest fears is that, like, I will say something and not be aware that I'm, like, saying it or something. That's why I got my wisdom teeth, like, taken out while I was awake and everything. I was not put under any kind of laughing gas or whatever it is that they give you. But I really wanted to experience the fun of the hypnosis session, but I did not want to be hypnotized. So, like, when he was saying, like, okay, let yourself drift, and I was like, alert, alert, alert. Like, I like tilted my head forward, but I was like, Robin, do not slip. Do not slip. So, like, I was in absolutely no danger of being hypnotized, because you kind of have to, like,
let them.
Yeah, you have to want to be hypnotized.
Right.
I think. Now, if somebody, like, if we get something that's, like, very weird and it's like, no, they didn't want to be hypnotized, like, I'm not disputing that. I'm just saying, like, from what I know about hypnosis at this moment, not really researching it, you kind of have to be cool with it.
From what I've heard, yeah.
Yeah, but it is so weird to me that can happen. But anyway, so this is the explanation for them about why in this moment her rage kicks in, and she basically gets the axe back from Betty, or overpowers her with it, because I think this is another moment where they're kind of grappling for it. And then hits her repeatedly. And this is the time when she's, like, hitting all of these, well, I guess at this point, like, 40 times. And it should be noted that it's not like, and I kind of hate to say this point, but it is important for the whole self-defense thing, that Betty was alive for most of it. Yeah.
Oh.
As in, like, by this point you have overpowered this person. This person is in no injury, and you are continually injuring this person.
And at that point, I know at least in non-deadly self-defense situations, you are always ruled as the guilty party if you go above and beyond. So, like, if they're talking about, like, there's this guy on TikTok, and he's a lawyer, and he does car crash videos, and he's like, who's at fault? I'll tell you in part 2 kind of situation. And basically there was one video where this man gets a bat out of his car and starts coming at the person who he's road raging against. And the person gets in their car, backs up, hits the guy, drives forward again, backs up again and hits the guy, and then drives forward. And they're like, well, this person is guilty and at fault, because if you had backed up into him to get him to stop and then just drove away, you would have been crystal clear. But the fact that you came back. So, I mean, Like, regardless if this is actually how the story started or the story went, or if it is worse than this or less, like, whatever, at this point, she should be in jail.
By those, if those standards ring true, then yes. They were using the whole rage thing from the past as, like, the reason behind this.
Yeah, but that explains it, but does not excuse it. And that kind of person needs to be locked up if you can go into a rage like that.
Yeah, so this was kind of brought up. There were two, I think, different psychiatrists who brought this up. So I think the psychiatrist, and I'm not exactly sure if it's the same one, but I think it is, who did the hypnosis on her, was kind of explaining that she was, like, in a dissociative state when this happened, which at first they were kind of wondering, okay, does that mean, like, she can't stand trial? And then they had somebody come in and assess her and deem her mentally competent, and they're like, okay, she can stand trial. But, you know, they had a psychiatrist on the prosecutor's side who kind of came in to dispute that claim, and he had not evaluated Candy. He had read the evidence or something, but he had not evaluated Candy. And he was saying, like, from what I can see, and I'm speaking as him, but this is not a quote.
Yeah.
From what I can see.
Paraphrased.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I didn't read an exact quote from him. But anyway, I read a description of what he said. From what I can see, if she truly was in a dissociative state, the actions that she did after the killing don't make sense because they were done by somebody who was very aware of what was going on. So I'm going to get into a bit of what happened after the killing.
Okay.
So after the killing, she at first tries to clean up a little bit, but then she realizes that's, like, simply impossible to do. So she goes to the bathroom, and this is why blood was in the bathroom, and she does, like, a rinse in the shower, wearing all of her clothes.
Okay.
Then she drives back to her house, bandages up her toe, which is hurting. She takes off her shirt, she puts it in the sink with detergent and water, she puts her pants in the washer, she takes a shower, and at that point, or maybe a little bit before that, she realized she had that cut on her forehead. She tries to put a Band-Aid on it, but she actually can't because of her hair. And then she takes her shirt, which is burgundy, so it would hide the blood stains, out of the sink, and she puts it in the dryer, and she puts on a new pair of jeans, and then when the shirt is dry, she puts it on, and she leaves, and she goes back to church, which is where she had originally come from. And at first I was wondering, like, when I was reading that, I was like, well, wait, why would she, like, why would she do something different with her shirt than she did her pants? And I realized, oh, that is because she needs to go back wearing the same shirt, but she can put on a different pair of jeans and nobody would, like,
notice. Yeah.
So she goes up there and she sees some women out front of the church, and she tells them the story that she would eventually go and, like, tell everybody about that day, up until she eventually confesses that she did do it, which is that she had gone to see Betty, chatted for a while, got in the swimsuit, decided to go to a Target in nearby Plano, Texas, to get Father's Day cards for her husband. And then she got there, realized that she wasn't sure what time it was because her watch had stopped, didn't go into the Target because she was worried she would be late, and then came back pretty late. And so she told that to basically everybody, kind of establishing where she had been.
Did anybody see the cut on her forehead or ask her about it?
Not that I know of.
She could have hidden it within her hairline or something, I guess.
Yeah. And she had, like, you know, she had a perm at that time. So then she went about a pretty normal day. Like, they did go and see Empire Strikes Back. Like, they had dinner at home, and she, you know, had all those calls with Alan, pretending like she didn't know what was going on, and then offering to go over and see, checking it and everything. The case for her, obviously, is what I just said, because that was everything that she said happened. It was verified by polygraph. She said this on a polygraph, and it came back that she was telling the truth, which, as we know, that there are some issues with that, so it's not definitive, but it is certainly not in her favor. Alan did testify on the stand about their affair, so this was, by that point, public knowledge. The prosecution side, a lot of people's perception is that the prosecution, or at least, okay, how about this? At least one person's perception, who was I think one of the people standing outside the courtroom was that the prosecution had not done the best job in this case, because the defense, the lawyer there, was very passionate. He was so passionate, in fact, he got cited for contempt of court twice and was sentenced to 4 days in prison after the verdict was read.
Wow.
But the prosecutor, whose name was Tom O'Connell, he had a very more, I would say, methodical approach, even though it was very logical, but I don't know if it was necessarily telling. It wasn't a lot of, like, the kind of big storytelling that the other lawyer was doing. So Tom O'Connell was trying to catch her in the lie. And the way he did this, he asked her to basically retell what I told you about the fight with Betty, or the time she had encountered Betty, you know, from getting there or not. But he asked her to kind of, like, summarize it a bit more. And the idea here is that if there's a discrepancy, it might more easily come up, since, like, she can't tell a rehearsed story.
Right.
But actually, it ended up working against him, because she had absolutely no discrepancies, in fact, come up. And in fact, she actually brought up details that she didn't even bring up in the first one, not in a way that contradicts it, but almost in a way that solidifies it, because, again, she's not thinking off a rehearsed story, and all the details were true. And it was like the placement of the peppermint bowl, stuff like that, like little things. And so it made it look even more like she was telling the truth to the jury. And he also kind of tried to, like, do her character in a little bit, and by this, and this is I think probably, like, the biggest thing that he could bring against her, or at least the biggest definitive thing, like, we know you did this, which is leaving the baby. Like, she knew that the baby was not being cared for, that the baby, somebody needed, well, I think it was a single story house, but that the baby was not being cared for. And that, I mean, if the husband was out of town, if you let it last for too long, that could be a really dangerous situation. Yeah. And we don't know how long it was going to last. Now, I'm wondering or betting that that's probably, I mean, listen, I'm not going to say anything in her favor or against necessarily, but I'm betting, like, that could be an understanding of why she kept asking, like, do you want me to go over there?
Gotcha. Okay.
That's a possibility. So basically, the trial lasted 8 total days. Again, the jury had to determine if she knowingly and intentionally killed Betty, and it was 9 women and 3 men, and they deliberated on October 30th for just over 3 hours. And when they first started deliberating, they asked for all the evidence to be brought in so they could all look at it together. And when the verdict was read, pretty much everybody was shocked. People inside the court were shocked. They were, like, very quiet, like, in their shockedness. And sorry, that was a stupid way of putting it. And the people outside were very shocked. But she was found not guilty. Yes. Ooh. She was found not guilty. She had her eyes closed when they read the verdict, but eventually kind of opened them, started tearing up. She hugged her husband. She whispered something to him, and he put his arm around her. And
I would not accept her back after hearing that.
Well,
I would not allow her around my kids. Like,
he did. They were they had to be escorted out because there was like a threat made against her that was given to the judge. The judge. So they had to be, like, escorted out via security and stuff. And she was also crying then too. And basically what happened with them, they moved to Georgia. He already had a job lined up. Everybody kind of got out of town after this. They got out of town. I think I found that they divorced, but I'm not completely sure. And then Alan also got out of town when Alan left. So when he left, he declined to comment to the reporters and stuff, which is totally his prerogative. He had tears in his eyes as he was leaving. That's kind of like the last thing we know of him, like, at least of that moment. There's more stuff after that, but Betty's father, Bob, was there every day during the trial. He talked to reporters after that, and he said, at least according to the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, "As far as I'm concerned, justice will be done eventually. We don't know what happened. Yes, I was very surprised." End quote. Like, by the verdict, he was very surprised. Right. It basically, like I said, everybody moved away from this town. People around the house where this ended up happening kind of, referred to it. I don't know if they've specifically referred to it as this, but it was kind of thought of as the murder house, and they would kind of treat it a little bit like a spectacle. Right. To the people who, like, lived there afterward, like, even peeking into the utility room and stuff, which is, like, really gross and don't do that. But I kind of want to, like, echo what Betty's father said, which is that, like, we just don't know what happened. Because in this case, like, really, nothing about the evidence that was collected contradicts anything that Candy said.
Mm-hmm.
It could be absolutely the truth. It could not be. We just don't know because the other person isn't alive to tell it.
Right.
Yeah.
Honestly, it just, to me, sounds like she just, maybe the story was true, but she said it out of order a little bit.
What do you mean?
Like, instead of first Betty attacking Candy with the axe, it could have been that Betty had her back turned and then Candy hit that first blow to the back. And then it was a struggle. And then, you know, and I could see if she was confident enough and had the story enough that she could easily be like, well, I am telling the truth. It's just she's telling it a little bit out of order. And so that's how she could have tricked the polygraph test. And, you know, because, I mean, I don't believe that. It would be absolutely insane to think that Betty would threaten her with an axe, you know?
Yeah. I mean, it could have been the first blow to the head. This, like, we're really ending the episode on we don't know what happened. And the thing is, nobody is ever going to know what happened.
Yeah.
Not for certain.
She definitely should have served some jail time, though, just because of how above and beyond. Like, at the very least, state-mandated psychiatric care or something. At the very, very least. Just because if you can go into a rage that would cause you to harm somebody like that, and then lie about it. I feel like the fact that she lied about it too, that automatically makes you have to go to jail. Now, if you accidentally kill someone and then you cover up the body, you go to jail.
Okay. I don't know the specific rules. And I also don't know, like, what might be a different understanding of the mental health ramifications in 1980 versus now, too.
Yeah.
I don't know.
They probably just called her a hysterical woman.
You know, I did never see that word, but it's definitely possible.
I think it's a couple decades after it was widely used, I think.
Hysterical was used for a long time.
Yeah.
1800s, yellow wallpaper, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But all right,
Anyway, well, thank you, Robin.
Thank you for listening.
Yes.
All right, so everyone, if you appreciated today's episode, please subscribe, rate, review, tell a friendo, and sign up to our Patreon at patreon.com/hauntedhospitality. For $3 a month, you get a new episode from us.
Yes, and the episode that came out yesterday was us talking about the Final Girl support group.
Woo!
And it comes out on the 13th because we're spooky. If you want to see Robin's sources, you can head over to hauntedhospitality.wordpress.com. If you have your own spooky story or if you have your own theory on what happened here, you can write to us at hauntedhospitalitypodcast@gmail.com. Or you can slide into our DMs.
Yes, you can find us on the interwebs. We are on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok at Haunted Hospitality. We're also on Twitter at Haunted Hosts. We hope to see you there.
Stay spooky.